Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring the world of drone piloting. And whether you're, a complete newbie or have some experience, this deep dive is going to take your knowledge to the next level. We're going to be unpacking excerpts from Drone Piloting for Dummies, which seems like the perfect place to start.
Right. Yeah,
By the end of this, you'll be able to pick the perfect drone for your needs, navigate those sometimes tricky FAA regulations, and even master the art of night flying.
it's pretty amazing how drones have become so popular in such a short time. They've gone from being, a niche hobby
Hmm.
to something that's transforming entire industries, really.
It really is fascinating. So let's dive right into the drone landscape. I always thought a drone was a drone, but it turns out there are different categories based on how you plan to use them, and of course, how much you're willing to spend.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like anything else. You've got your basic consumer models,
Yeah.
sometimes jokingly referred to as toys,
Hmm.
and then you've got your professional grade machines that can cost a pretty penny.
Speaking of which, the book shows us a couple of examples. There's the Radclo drone, which is a consumer-level drone, pictured in Figure 110. And then there's the DJI Mavic 3 Pro, a professional-level drone in Figure 113. You can really see the difference, not just in looks, but also in the capabilities.
Yeah, and one of the first things you'll want to consider when choosing a drone is camera quality,
Yeah.
after all.
Yeah.
Capturing stunning footage is probably a big reason why you're interested in drones in the first place.
Right, for sure. And then there's the gimbal, that thing that keeps the camera steady. I'm guessing that's pretty important for getting those smooth cinematic shots.
Oh, it's essential,
Hmm.
especially if you're looking to create professional quality videos. A good gimbal can make even a budget-friendly camera look like $1,000,000.
Mm.
And they're not all created equal either. You've got your two-axis gimbals, which stabilize the camera on two planes, and then you've got your three-axis gimbals, which offer even more stabilization, making your footage look super smooth.
Wow, I had no idea there are different types of gimbals. This is already more technical than I expected, but it makes sense. I'm always amazed by how stable drone footage is, even when the drone itself is moving.
Yeah, and to add another layer, the technology behind gimbals is pretty cool. They use these tiny motors and sensors to detect the drone's movements,
Yeah.
and then counteract those movements to keep the camera steady.
Mm. So it's like a mini stabilization system working in real time.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed. Okay, so camera quality and gimbal got it. What else is important when choosing a drone?
Battery life is a big one, especially if you're planning to, cover a lot of ground or capture longer shots. You don't want to be cutting your flight short because your battery died.
Right, that would be frustrating. I know the book mentioned something about flight time marketing hype. What's that all about?
Well, manufacturers love to boast about their drones' flight times. But what they don't always tell you is that those times are often achieved under ideal conditions, like no wind, perfect temperature, and sea level altitude.
So if I'm planning to fly in mountainous regions or on a windy day, my actual flight time might be significantly shorter.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Air density plays a huge role. You see, at higher altitudes, the air is thinner, which means the drone has to work harder to achieve lift, using up more battery in the process.
Okay, that makes sense. So I might need to choose a more powerful drone if I'm going to be flying in those conditions.
Precisely. And then there are features like obstacle avoidance, which can be a real lifesaver, especially if you're flying in challenging environments.
So obstacle avoidance, that's like having a little co-pilot on board,
Yeah.
making sure you don't run into things.
Exactly. It uses sensors to detect obstacles in the drone's path and automatically adjust its course to avoid them.
Mm.
But like any technology, it's not foolproof. You still need to be aware of your surroundings and use good judgment.
Right, it's like those driver assist features in cars. They're helpful, but you can't rely on them completely.
Okay, so we've got a good understanding of the different types of drones and what to consider when choosing one. Now, let's talk about those FAA regulations. It's important to make sure we're flying safely and legally, right?
Absolutely. And the FAA takes drone regulations very seriously. They want to make sure everyone is safe up there.
So when do I need to register my drone with the FAA?
Any drone weighing over 250 grams,
Hmm.
which is a little over half a pound, has to be registered,
Hmm.
regardless of whether you're flying for fun or profit.
Got it. So if my drone weighs more than that, it's a must-do. And what about those certificates Trust and Part 107? I've heard those terms thrown around. What's the difference?
Think of it this way. Trust is like a driver's ed course for recreational drone flyers. It's a free online test that you take to prove you understand basic safety guidelines and regulations.
So if I just want to fly my drone for fun, Take some cool pictures and maybe impress my friends. Trust is all I need. Exactly. But if you're thinking about using your drone for commercial purposes, like taking photos or videos for clients, then you'll need to get a Part 107 certification.
So taking family photos at the beach is recreational, but using drone footage for a monetized Instagram account would need that. Part 107.
That's a great example. It highlights the distinction perfectly. Part 107 is a more in-depth certification that allows you to make money from your drone skills.
Makes sense. It's like getting a professional license to operate a drone for business purposes. And I'm assuming there are key flight regulations that apply to everyone, regardless of whether they're flying for fun or profit, right?
You got it. Things like maximum altitude, maintaining visual line of sight, VLOS, and restrictions on flying over people and moving vehicles. These are the rules of the road, so to speak, to ensure safety in the airspace.
So I can't just fly my drone wherever I want, whenever I want. There are actual rules I need to follow.
Absolutely. And these rules apply 24/7, regardless of the time of day, with the exception of the requirement for anti-collision lighting, which is specifically for night flights.
Okay, good to know. I don't want to be breaking any rules or putting anyone at risk. And what about airspace? I've heard it's like navigating invisible highways in the sky. How do we even know where we can and can't fly?
That's where the B4UFLY app comes in handy. It's a free app developed by the FAA that helps you determine where it's safe and legal to fly your drone.
So this app shows me those invisible highways you were talking about. That's pretty cool.
It does. And it takes into account all sorts of factors, like different airspace classifications, temporary flight restrictions, and even areas where drones are prohibited altogether.
Whoa. So if I wanted to fly near an airport, I could actually check this app to see if it's allowed.
You could. And in some cases, you can even request authorization to fly in restricted airspace through the app. It's like getting permission to enter a special zone.
That's amazing. So this app is like my one-stop shop for navigating the airspace. I'm definitely downloading that before I even think about flying a drone.
Yeah, it's a must-have for any drone pilot. And speaking of airspace, let's talk about two important terms you'll come across: MSL and AGL.
MSL and AGL. I have no idea what those stand for.
MSL stands for mean sea level, and AGL stands for above ground level.
Okay, so one is about how high you are above the sea, and the other is about how high you are above the ground. But why are both important?
Well, the FAA sets a maximal altitude of 400 feet AGL for drones. But that 400 feet starts from where you take off. The book uses a great example. Imagine taking off from sea level versus taking off from a mile-high city like Denver.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I'm following the 400-foot rule, my drone would actually be much higher in the air if I took off in Denver, because the city itself is already a mile above sea level.
Exactly. It's not just about following the numbers, but understanding the why behind them and how they relate to your specific flying location.
This is already making my head spin a little, but in a good way. It's like realizing there's a whole new world up there with its own set of rules and considerations.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. But don't worry, we'll break it all down in a way that's easy to understand and apply.
Okay, good. Because I'm ready to move on to the fun part, actually flying the drone.
I thought you might be. But before we get to those piloting skills, there's one more important concept we need to cover: scene mode.
Scene mode? What's that?
It's a flight mode that's available on many drones. And it's especially helpful for beginners because it slows down the drone's movements, making it easier to control while you're learning.
Oh, that's brilliant. So it's like putting the training wheels on before I hit the open road.
Exactly. It gives you a chance to get a feel for the controls and practice those basic maneuvers without the drone zipping around like a hummingbird.
Okay, I'm sold on Sing mode. Let's talk about those basic maneuvers. What are we going to learn?
We'll start with the essentials: taking off and landing smoothly, flying in basic shapes like a square, circle, and triangle, and then progress to slightly more advanced maneuvers like the orbit and spiral.
It's like learning to drive a car. First, you master the parking lot, then you venture out onto the streets.
And just like learning to drive, practice makes perfect. The book recommends practicing these maneuvers in Sim mode to really build muscle memory and precise control.
This is getting me excited. It's like I can already feel the drone in my hands. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about that camera. I'm assuming we need more than just a good camera and a steady gimbal to capture those amazing shots.
Right. You're right. There's a whole art to drone cinematography, and we'll delve into that a bit later. But for now, let's stick with the basics.
Sounds good to me. I'm ready to take this deep dive to the next level. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground already. From picking the right drone and understanding FAA regulations to practicing basic maneuvers in cine mode. It's been quite the deep dive. But what happens when things don't go according to plan? What about those oh no moments that every drone pilot dreads?
That's a great question. And it's something every drone pilot needs to be prepared for. Because, let's face it, even the most experienced pilots encounter unexpected situations. That's why it's crucial to understand emergency procedures.
Okay, so emergency procedures. This is about knowing what to do when things go wrong. What are some of the most common causes of drone emergencies?
Well, the book lists a few culprits, and I bet you can guess some of them. First up, we've got lost link. That's when your connection to the drone goes kaput and you're suddenly flying blind.
Yikes, that sounds scary. I imagine it's like losing your phone signal in the middle of an important call.
Exactly. Except in this case, you've got a potentially expensive piece of equipment hanging in the air with no way to control it directly.
Okay, what else? What other emergencies should we be prepared for?
Sudden weather changes are another big one. Imagine you're flying on a beautiful, sunny day, and out of nowhere, a gust of wind picks up, or the thick fog rolls in.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem. You might lose sight of the drone, or the wind could push it off course.
Exactly. And then there are those pesky battery issues. You think you have enough juice to finish your flight, and suddenly the battery indicator starts flashing red.
So what do you do in that situation? Do you just try to land as quickly as possible?
That's definitely one option. But it's important to stay calm and assess the situation. If you're close to your takeoff point, a quick landing might be the best course of action. But if you're far away or over difficult terrain, you might need to rely on the drone's return to home feature, RTH.
RTH, that's like a homing beacon for your drone, right? I've heard stories of pilots relying on RTH to save their drones from getting lost or crashing.
It can be a lifesaver, but it's important to understand how it works and how to set it up correctly before every flight. RTH essentially tells the drone to fly back to its takeoff point autonomously using GPS.
So it's like programming a destination into your car's GPS system.
That's a good analogy. But just like a car's GPS, RTH isn't foolproof. There might be obstacles in the drone's path, or it could encounter interference that disrupts the GPS signal.
That's a good point. It's a safety feature. But it's not a magic button that solves every problem.
Right. And speaking of things that can go wrong, we can't forget about bird strikes. It might sound funny, but birds and drones don't always mix well.
I can imagine. I guess birds aren't always fans of sharing the airspace.
Nope, they're not. And a bird strike can cause serious damage to a drone, potentially leading to a crash.
Okay, so we've got lost link, weather changes, battery issues, and bird strikes. What else? Are there any other common causes of drone emergencies?
Well, sometimes it's the technology itself that lets us down. We've talked about obstacle avoidance features, but over-reliance on those systems can also lead to problems.
So you're saying that even though those obstacle avoidance systems are designed to prevent crashes, they can sometimes make things worse.
It's a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But yes, pilots might become complacent, thinking the system will save them from every obstacle.
Yeah.
And they end up not paying close enough attention to their surroundings.
It's like those driver assist features in cars. They're great, but they can also give drivers a false sense of security.
Exactly. And just like drivers need to stay alert, drone pilots need to be vigilant, even with obstacle avoidance activated. And of course, we can't forget about the most common culprit of all, pilot error.
Yes. We all make mistakes, right?
We do.
Yeah.
And in the world of drone piloting, even small mistakes can have big consequences.
So it's about being aware of our limitations, staying focused, and constantly honing our skills. But let's say an emergency does happen. We've talked about RTH as a potential solution, but what are some other key strategies for dealing with these situations?
First and foremost, stay calm. Panicking will only make things worse. Take a deep breath, assess the situation, and try to figure out the best course of action.
Okay, stay calm. Assess the situation. What's next?
If you've lost link, try to reestablish the connection. Sometimes it's as simple as moving to a different location or restarting your controller.
And if that doesn't work?
Well, if you're in an area with good GPS coverage and the drone is still responding, you can initiate RTH.
And if RTH isn't an option, like if there are obstructions in the drone's path, or it's experiencing a system failure,
then you need to be prepared to take manual control and land the drone safely, if possible. This is where those basic piloting skills we talked about earlier become absolutely crucial.
So practicing those maneuvers in a safe environment isn't just about looking cool. It's about developing the skills you need to handle emergencies.
Exactly. The more comfortable you are with manual control, the better equipped you'll be to deal with unexpected situations. And sometimes the safest option is to simply land the drone immediately, even if it means landing in a less than ideal spot.
I think it's important to emphasize that safety always comes first, even if it means potentially damaging or losing your drone.
I couldn't agree more. No shot is worth risking your safety or the safety of others. It's better to lose a drone than to cause an accident.
Speaking of losing a drone, I've heard that carrying extra weight can increase the risk of emergencies. What are the real-world factors we need to consider when it comes to weight?
You're right, carrying extra weight, whether it's a high-resolution camera or sensors for data collection, can definitely impact the drone's performance and potentially increase the risk of an emergency. The drone's manual will usually state the maximum weight it can handle, but there are other factors to consider.
So just because the manual says my drone can carry a certain weight, doesn't mean I should always max it out.
Exactly. Think back to those forces of flight we discussed earlier. Altitude and wind play a huge role. Higher altitudes mean thinner air, so the drone has to work harder to achieve lift. And wind creates drag, adding more strain.
So even if the manual says my drone can carry 5 pounds, I might not want to load it up that much if I'm flying in a windy, mountainous area.
That's right. It's about being mindful of the conditions and making smart decisions based on the capabilities of your drone. And then there's the issue of balance. The book talks about the center of gravity, which is super important for stable flight.
Center of gravity. It's like finding the sweet spot for weight distribution, right?
Precisely. If the weight isn't balanced correctly, the drone can become unstable and difficult to control, which obviously increases the risk of an accident.
So it's not just about how much weight you're carrying, but also how that weight is distributed on the drone.
Exactly. And this is where things can get a bit technical. There are specific calculations and techniques for determining the center of gravity and ensuring proper balance.
Okay, so maybe we should save that deep dive into center of gravity calculations for another episode, but for now. I think we've covered the essential points when it comes to carrying extra weight safely.
I agree. We've talked about the potential risks and the importance of considering factors like altitude, wind, and balance. But remember, the drone's manual is your best friend when it comes to understanding weight limitations.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in this episode. We've learned about choosing the right drone, understanding FAA regulations, mastering basic maneuvers, and handling emergency procedures. What's next? What other aspects of drone piloting should we be exploring?
Well, we've focused a lot on the technical side of things. But there's another crucial aspect we need to dive into. The pilot's mindset.
The pilot's mindset, what does that mean?
It's about developing those critical attitudes and decision-making skills that separate the pros from the amateurs. Because knowledge is power. But responsible drone piloting is about applying that knowledge with a safety-first attitude.
That makes sense. It's not just about knowing the rules and techniques, it's about having the right mental approach.
Exactly. So are you ready to dive into the pilot's mindset and explore those all-important safety attitudes?
Absolutely, because a drone is only as good as the person flying it. Let's do it.
Welcome back to our deep dive into drone piloting. We've learned about the hardware, the regulations, and even how to handle emergencies. Now, as promised, we're going deeper, exploring the pilot's mindset. Because, as we all know, a drone is only as good as the person flying it. You got it. We can have all the knowledge and skills in the world, but if we don't have the right mindset, we're setting ourselves up for trouble. The book really emphasizes the importance of avoiding two dangerous attitudes, machoism and resignation.
Machoism and resignation, those sound like two ends of a spectrum. What exactly do they mean in the context of drone piloting?
Well, machoism is that.
Yeah.
I can handle anything. I'm invincible attitude.
Yeah.
It's that overconfidence that can lead to risky decisions, like pushing the drone's limits in bad weather or trying to pull off a tricky maneuver just to impress someone.
I see. So it's that hold my beer and watch this mentality that can get people into trouble.
Exactly. And it's especially dangerous when flying a drone because the consequences of a mistake can be serious, not just for the pilot, but for anyone in the vicinity.
Right. It's not just about damaging or losing the drone. It's about potentially causing harm to people or property.
Exactly. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have resignation. This is that feeling of defeat or helplessness, especially when facing challenges or unexpected situations.
So instead of actively assessing the situation and taking control, a resigned pilot might become passive and react too slowly. potentially making the situation worse.
That's right. It's like giving up before you've even tried to find a solution. Both of these attitudes, machoism and resignation, can compromise safety and lead to poor decision-making.
So what's the ideal mindset for a drone pilot?
It's about finding that balance, being confident in your skills and knowledge, but also being aware of your limitations and ready to adapt to changing circumstances.
It's like that saying, there are old pilots and bold pilots, but no old, bold pilots.
Exactly. Experience teaches us that caution and humility are essential qualities for any pilot, especially when it comes to drones.
Okay, so we need to find that balance between confidence and caution. What else is important when it comes to the pilot's mindset?
The book highlights situational awareness as a key factor. It's about being aware of what's happening around you, not just focusing on the drone screen.
So it's about looking beyond the drone's camera and taking in the bigger picture. What are some things we should be aware of?
Well, for starters, you should always be checking for other aircraft in the area. Drones are relatively small and can be difficult to see, so it's important to be aware of your surroundings and avoid potential collisions.
Right. And I imagine weather changes are also important to be aware of.
Absolutely. A sudden gust of wind can easily send a drone off course, so it's important to keep an eye on the sky and be prepared to adjust your flight plan if necessary.
And what about things on the ground? Do we need to be aware of people and obstacles in the area?
Absolutely. You should always be mindful of where you're flying and make sure you're not putting anyone at risk. Avoid flying over people or crowds, and be aware of obstacles like trees, power lines, and buildings.
So it's about treating the airspace with respect and being aware of how our actions might affect others.
Exactly. And here's an interesting point the book makes. It's not just about external factors. You also need to be aware of your own physical and mental state.
So you're saying that how I'm feeling can actually affect my ability to fly a drone safely?
Absolutely. If you're tired, stressed, distracted, or under the influence of alcohol or medication, your judgment and reaction time can be impaired, which can increase the risk of making mistakes.
That makes sense. It's like driving a car you wouldn't get behind the wheel if you were feeling drowsy or had been drinking.
Exactly. And the same principles apply to drone piloting. The book mentions a couple of acronyms that are helpful for pilots. IMSAFE and PAVE.
IMSAFE and PAVE, those sound like handy tools. What do they stand for?
IMSAFE stands for illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and emotion. Before every flight, a pilot should honestly assess themselves against these factors.
So if I'm not feeling 100%, if I'm on medication that could impair my judgment, if I'm overly stressed or haven't slept well, it's better to stay grounded.
Absolutely. No drone flight is worth compromising safety. And then there's the PAVE checklist, which focuses on the pilot, aircraft environment, and external pressures.
Okay, let's break those down. Pilot, that's me. My skills, experience, and physical mental state. Aircraft, that's making sure my drone is in tip-top shape. Batteries charged. Pre-flight checks completed. What about environment and external pressures?
Environment is all about assessing the conditions you'll be flying in, weather, airspace restrictions, obstacles in the area, and external pressures are those things that might push you to make risky decisions. Deadlines, client demands, that urge to get the perfect shot no matter what.
So before every flight, a responsible drone pilot should go through these checklists, honestly assessing each factor and making sure everything is in order.
You got it. These checklists are like your safety net, helping you identify potential risks and make informed decisions. It's about taking a proactive approach to safety, rather than reacting to problems when they arise.
Right. It's about being prepared and thinking ahead. But even with the best preparation, things can still go wrong. So what about decision-making skills? How can we improve our ability to make sound judgments in flight?
The book talks about the DECIDE model, a framework for making sound decisions in flight.
Decide. I love that. It sounds like a clear and concise process. Let's walk through the steps.
The first step is to detect the problem. This means recognizing that something is off, whether it's a weather change, a drone malfunction, or something else that requires your attention.
Okay, so you sense that something isn't right. What's next?
Then you estimate the need to react. Is this something that needs immediate attention, or can it wait?
So you're evaluating the severity of the problem and how quickly you need to respond.
Exactly. Then you choose a course of action. What's the safest and most effective way to handle this situation?
So you're considering your options and picking the best one based on the circumstances.
That's right. Once you've chosen your course of action, you need to identify the solution. This means breaking down the chosen action into specific steps.
So instead of just thinking, I need to land,
Right.
you're thinking, I need to reduce altitude, find a clear landing spot, and execute a controlled descent.
Exactly. You're creating a clear plan of action. And then, of course, you need to put the necessary steps. Put your plan into action. Yeah. But here's the key. Be flexible and ready to adapt if needed.
So you're not just blindly following your plan. You're constantly assessing the situation and making adjustments as needed.
Precisely. And the final step is to evaluate the outcome. Did your actions resolve the problem? What could you have done differently?
So it's not just about reacting to the situation. It's also about learning from the experience and improving your decision-making skills for the future.
That's right. It's a continuous loop of assessing, deciding, acting, and learning. And with practice, this decision-making process becomes second nature, allowing you to react calmly and effectively in challenging situations.
This is amazing. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from picking the right drone and understanding FAA regulations to mastering flight techniques, handling emergency procedures, and even adopting that all-important safety mindset. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. You've been an amazing student. But remember, the learning never stops. The world of drones is constantly evolving. So it's important to stay up to date on the latest technologies, regulations, and best practices.
You're right. This is just the beginning of my drone journey.
And it's going to be an exciting one.
I can't wait to put all this knowledge into practice and start exploring the world from a whole new perspective.
Remember, safety first, have fun, and never stop learning.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of drone piloting.
Until next time, happy flying.